My name is Nora, and at 35, I thought I had the perfect life with James, my husband of 7 years. Last month, we attended what was supposed to be an important business dinner at Le Chateau, the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I never expected to see his ex-girlfriend there, and I certainly never expected to hear him call her the most beautiful woman he's ever known, right in front of me. But I didn't make a scene. I simply smiled because I already knew exactly what I was going to do. If you're watching this and have ever felt invisible in your own relationship, let me know where you're from in the comments and subscribe if you want to hear how I turned my pain into power. I grew up in a small town outside of Chicago, the daughter of a teacher and a postal worker. We never had much money, but my parents instilled in me a strong work ethic and the belief that education could take me anywhere. I worked 2 jobs to put myself through college, eventually earning a degree in marketing. By the time I was 27, I had worked my way up from an entry-level position to become a marketing executive at one of the top firms in Chicago. That's where I was when I met James. My company had sponsored a charity gala, and I was there representing our brand. James was among the wealthy donors, looking impossibly handsome in his custom tuxedo. He came from old money. His family owned a chain of luxury hotels across the country. When he approached me that night, I was immediately drawn to his confidence and charm. "You're the only person in this room who looks like they'd rather be making a difference than showing off their jewelry," he said, handing me a glass of champagne. I laughed. "Is that your standard opening line?" "No, usually. I just introduce myself and let my bank account do the talking," he replied, with a self-deprecating smile that made my heart flutter. "I'm James Harrison." Our conversation lasted for hours that night. We discovered a shared love of old films, spicy food, and Sunday morning crossword puzzles. He seemed different from the other wealthy men I'd met, more grounded, more interested in my thoughts than in showing off. Our courtship was a whirlwind. Within 6 months, we were practically living together. James would surprise me with weekend trips to New York, or flowers delivered to my office for no reason at all. When he proposed after just 9 months of dating, I said yes without hesitation. Looking back now, there were warning signs I chose to ignore, like the way he insisted on paying for everything even when I wanted to contribute. At first it seemed generous, but gradually I realized it gave him control. "Honey, you don't need to worry about the bill," he'd say, taking my credit card from my hand and replacing it with his platinum card. "Save your money for things you want to buy." Or the subtle comments about my wardrobe when we attended events with his friends. "Maybe we should get you something from Neiman Marcus for the gala." He'd suggest, looking at my carefully chosen dress with barely concealed disapproval. But these moments were overshadowed by his grand gestures and the genuine connection I thought we shared. Our wedding was everything I'd dreamed of, intimate yet elegant, with just 80 of our closest friends and family in attendance. The first 2 years of our marriage were mostly happy. We moved into a beautiful penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago, and I continued to build my career while James thrived at his family's company. But when his father decided to expand their hotel chain to the West Coast, James was tapped to oversee the new properties. "It's a huge opportunity," he explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "Dad says if I do well with this, I could become CEO when he retires." That's how I found myself leaving my job, my friends and the city I loved, to move to San Francisco. James promised it would be good for both of us, a fresh start, new opportunities. And for a while it was. I found a new position at a smaller firm, and though it was a step down from my previous role, I was determined to prove myself again. 3 years into our marriage, James's father expanded the hotel chain internationally, requiring us to relocate to New York. Once again, I left everything behind to support my husband's career. This time, the transition wasn't as smooth. The New York marketing scene was cutthroat, and I struggled to find a position that matched my experience level. "Don't worry about working if it's too stressful," James suggested during a tense dinner after I'd received another rejection. "We have more than enough money." "That's not the point," I replied, pushing my food around my plate. "I need something that's mine, something I've built." Eventually, I landed a role at a boutique agency specializing in luxury brands. It was challenging work, but I thrived on it, slowly rebuilding my professional reputation and regaining my financial independence. I made sure to keep a separate bank account, something James frowned upon, but ultimately accepted. "I don't understand why you need your own money," he said more than once. "What's mine is yours." But I had learned from my mother's experiences. She had always told me, a woman should never be completely financially dependent on a man. Always keep something for yourself. It was advice that would later prove invaluable. As we approached our 5th anniversary, I began to notice changes in James. He worked later, was constantly on his phone, and seemed emotionally distant. When I tried to discuss it, he would blame work stress or change the subject entirely. "You're imagining things," became his standard response whenever I questioned why he had suddenly become so secretive with his phone or why he had business dinners that ran until midnight. I tried to dismiss my suspicions as paranoia. After all, we had built a life together. He wouldn't throw that away, would he? But the gnawing feeling in my stomach told me something wasn't right. I just didn't know how wrong things actually were. The first time I heard the name Amanda Kingston was during our 2nd year of marriage. James had mentioned her casually, his college girlfriend from an equally wealthy family, someone his parents had adored and expected him to marry. "What happened between you two?" I asked, naturally curious about this woman who had almost been in my place. "We wanted different things," James explained vaguely. "Her family moved to Europe, and the long-distance thing didn't work out. It was for the best." I didn't think much of it at the time. Everyone has ex-partners, and ours were safely in the past. Or so I thought. Last winter, 7 years into our marriage, James mentioned in passing that Amanda had moved back to New York after a divorce. "How did you know that?" I asked, surprised by this detail about a woman he supposedly hadn't seen in over a decade. "Oh, she connected with me on LinkedIn," he replied too casually. "Just professional networking." I noticed a shift in James after that conversation. He checked his phone more frequently, often smiling at messages he quickly hid when I entered the room. He started working late, at least 3 nights a week, coming home smelling of expensive perfume he claimed was from hugging Janice from accounting during her retirement party. Then came the subtle changes in his appearance. New designer suits, and expensive watch I didn't recognize, more time spent at the gym. When I complimented him on his efforts, he brushed it off. "The company is expanding. I need to look the part of a future CEO," he explained with a shrug. One evening I was using James's laptop to order takeout when a notification appeared from his email. Normally I would respect his privacy, but the preview caught my eye. "Looking forward to seeing you again, A." I hesitated, my finger hovering over the touchpad. Was I really going to invade my husband's privacy? But something in my gut told me I needed to know. I clicked on the email. "James, it was wonderful catching up last week. Looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow for lunch. Like old times? Amanda." My hands trembled as I clicked through their email chain. There was nothing explicitly romantic, but the familiarity and frequency of their communications told me this was more than professional networking. I closed the laptop and tried to calm my racing heart. I needed more information before confronting him. Perhaps I was overreacting. Perhaps this was really just an old friend reconnecting. A week later, James announced he had a major business dinner coming up with potential investors for a new hotel project. "It's a big deal," he explained, straightening his tie in the mirror. "This could mean a partnership worth millions." "Do you want me to help you prepare?" I offered, leaning against the doorframe. "We could go over the proposal together." "No need," he said quickly. "The team has it covered. But you'll come to the dinner, right? Spouses are expected." "Of course," I replied. "Just let me know when and where." That evening I did some research of my own. With a few strategic searches, I discovered that Amanda Kingston now worked as the Vice President of Acquisitions at Lexington Group, one of the potential investor companies James had mentioned. The pieces were starting to fit together in a way that made my stomach churn. Despite my growing suspicions, I decided to support my husband. Perhaps I was connecting dots that weren't there. Perhaps this was really just business with an old acquaintance who happened to be his ex-girlfriend. The day of the dinner, James was unusually particular about our appearance. "Wear the blue Valentino," he suggested. It brings out your eyes. The blue Valentino was his favorite dress on me, the one he said made me look elegant but not attention-seeking. I chose my red Versace instead. I think this suits the occasion better, I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. If Amanda Kingston was going to be there, I wasn't going to fade into the background. James frowned but didn't argue. As we got ready, I noticed him checking his phone constantly, his fingers typing rapid responses to messages he didn't share with me. "Is everything okay with the dinner?" I asked, applying my lipstick. "Yes, fine," he replied distractedly. "Just confirming some details." I nodded, pretending to believe him while mentally preparing myself for whatever the evening might bring. If my suspicions were correct, I needed to maintain my composure and dignity. No matter what happened, I wouldn't give anyone the satisfaction of seeing me fall apart. Le Chateau was the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, occupying the entire top floor of a skyscraper with panoramic views of the city. As we stepped out of the elevator, a hostess in a sleek black dress greeted us. "Mr. and Mrs. Harrison, welcome," she said with a practiced smile. "The rest of your party is already seated in the private dining room." James adjusted his tie nervously, a gesture I recognized from whenever he was anxious about something. His eyes darted around the room as if searching for someone specific. "Are you looking for someone?" I asked innocently. "Just checking to see who's already here," he replied, not meeting my eyes. The private dining room was opulently decorated with crystal chandeliers and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering city below. Around a large oval table sat several people in business attire engaged in conversation over cocktails. My eyes immediately fell on a woman with impeccable blonde hair styled in an elegant bob, wearing a black designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. I knew instantly who she was. The way James's breath caught when he saw her confirmed it. "James, there you are," called out an older man I recognized as Walter Blackwell, CEO of one of the investment firms. As we approached the table, the blonde woman turned her perfectly made-up face, breaking into a practiced smile. She was beautiful in that effortless way that comes from generations of good breeding and unlimited access to the best of everything. "James, it's been too long," she said, extending her hand to him, rather than offering the customary business cheek kiss. He took it, holding it a moment longer than necessary. "Amanda, wonderful to see you," he replied, his voice softer than usual. Then, as if suddenly remembering my existence, he added, "This is my wife, Nora." "Nora, such a pleasure," Amanda said, turning her calculated smile toward me. "James has mentioned you." The way she said it made it clear that James had mentioned very little about me, and I wondered how many of their conversations had excluded my existence entirely. "Interesting," I replied with a smile of my own. "He's mentioned you too." A flicker of surprise crossed her face before she recovered. Clearly, she hadn't expected me to know who she was. Throughout the cocktail hour, I watched as James positioned himself near Amanda at every opportunity. When we moved to the dinner table, he practically raced to pull out the chair beside her, leaving me to be seated between Walter Blackwell and another investor across the table. The evening progressed with business discussion interspersed with personal anecdotes, as these dinners typically do. I engaged politely with the people around me while keeping an eye on my husband and his ex-girlfriend. Their behavior became increasingly flirtatious as the night went on, shared whispers, inside jokes, casual touches that lingered too long. When it came time to order wine, James took charge without consulting anyone. "The 2010 Chateau Margaux," he told the sommelier. "It's a particular favorite." I knew for a fact that James preferred Burgundy to Bordeaux. As the sommelier poured, Amanda's eyes lit up. "You remembered?" she said quietly to James, but not quietly enough that I couldn't hear. "That's the wine we had in Paris." "Some things you never forget," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. The conversation gradually shifted from business to personal memories, with James and Amanda increasingly dominating the discussion with references to people and places from their shared past. "Remember Professor Winters at Princeton?" Amanda asked with a laugh. "He always said you were his most promising student." "And remember that little bistro near your parents' summer home?" James added, grinning. "We used to sneak away there during family gatherings." The other business associates exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly sensing the inappropriate intimacy developing at what was supposed to be a professional dinner. Then came the moment that shattered any remaining illusion I had about my marriage. Walter Blackwell, perhaps trying to steer the conversation back to safer ground, asked about the hotel project they were discussing. As Amanda began explaining her company's interest, the light from the chandelier caught her diamond earrings, making them sparkle. "Beautiful earrings," commented one of the other women at the table. James, who had been staring at Amanda throughout her entire explanation, nodded in agreement. "Amanda has always had exquisite taste," he said, his voice warm with admiration. Then, looking directly into her eyes, he added, "She's the most beautiful woman I've ever known." The table fell silent. Every eye darted between James, Amanda, and me. Amanda had the decency to look embarrassed, though I caught the triumphant gleam in her eye as she glanced my way. The other guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, suddenly fascinated by their dessert plates. I felt as though I had been doused in ice water, my entire body going cold then hot with humiliation. 7 years of marriage, countless sacrifices, and unwavering support, and this was how he repaid me. Not just by having an emotional affair at minimum, but by publicly humiliating me in front of business associates. "Excuse me," I said calmly, placing my napkin beside my plate. "I need to use the restroom." In the elegant marble bathroom of Le Chateau, I gripped the edge of the sink and stared at my reflection. My face was composed, but my eyes revealed the storm raging inside. I had 3 choices. I could create a scene and confront them both publicly. I could silently endure the humiliation and deal with it privately later, or I could take control of the narrative right now. As I reapplied my lipstick, a calm clarity settled over me. This was not just about tonight. This was about years of subtle put-downs, of taking me for granted, of expecting me to sacrifice everything while he sacrificed nothing. This was about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. And in that moment, I knew exactly what I needed to do. When I returned to the table, I was the picture of composure. If anyone expected tears or a scene, they were disappointed. Instead, I rejoined the conversation as if nothing had happened, directing a warm smile around the table. "I hope I didn't miss anything important," I said lightly. The relief on the other guests' faces was palpable. James looked surprised, then relieved, clearly having expected a different reaction. Amanda seemed almost disappointed, as if she'd been looking forward to witnessing my distress. For the remainder of the dinner, I executed what I later came to think of as my greatest marketing campaign, the marketing of myself as a woman who was unbothered, professional, and completely in control. I engaged the business associates in thoughtful conversation about the hotel project, demonstrating my knowledge of the industry and offering insights from my marketing background. "You know what would really set this property apart is a unique brand identity focused on environmental sustainability," I suggested to Walter Blackwell, who nodded with genuine interest. "Luxury and responsibility don't have to be mutually exclusive." "That's actually a fascinating angle," Walter replied, clearly grateful for the shift to professional topics. "The data shows increasing consumer preference for eco-conscious luxury." While James and Amanda continued their private conversations, seemingly oblivious to everyone else, I was building connections of my own. By dessert, I had exchanged business cards with 3 potential clients for my agency and had been invited to speak at an upcoming industry conference by another dinner guest. "Your wife is quite impressive, James," commented Walter, interrupting whatever James was whispering to Amanda. "You never mentioned she was such an expert in brand development." James looked up, momentarily confused, as if he'd forgotten I had a successful career of my own. "Oh, yes. Nora is very good at what she does." His dismissive tone only strengthened my resolve. As coffee was served, I noticed Amanda whispering something in James's ear that made him nod eagerly. When the dinner finally concluded, everyone stood to say their goodbyes. James cleared his throat. Some of us were thinking of continuing our discussions at the Highland Bar downstairs. More informal setting. His eyes flickered between Amanda and the other guests, but not to me. The invitation clearly didn't include his wife. That sounds lovely, I said, pulling out my phone. But I just got an urgent email from a client. Crisis with their campaign launch. The lie rolled off my tongue smoothly. I should head home and deal with it. Oh, James replied, poorly concealing his relief. That's unfortunate. Don't wait up for me, it might be a late night. I'm sure it will be, I thought, but outwardly I just smiled and nodded. I'll call my own car, I added, already opening the rideshare app on my phone. As I said my goodbyes to the dinner guests, I made sure to exchange firm handshakes with the business contacts I'd made. When I reached Amanda, I looked her directly in the eyes. It was so interesting to finally meet you, Amanda. James has told me so much about you. I kept my voice warm, but allowed my eyes to communicate that I wasn't as oblivious as they thought. Enjoy the rest of your evening. The slight falter in her smile gave me a small satisfaction. In the car ride home, instead of crying or calling friends to vent, I formulated my plan with methodical precision. By the time I reached our penthouse apartment, I knew exactly what steps to take. First, I gathered our important documents: marriage certificate, property deeds, insurance policies, and financial statements, and placed them in my personal lockbox. Then I logged into our joint bank accounts and transferred my rightful portion of our savings into my private account, something I had maintained throughout our marriage despite James's objections. Next, I packed a suitcase with essential items: enough clothes for a week, my laptop, important jewelry, and irreplaceable personal mementos, including photos of my parents and friends. I wasn't taking anything that we had purchased together or that could be contested in a divorce. Just my personal belongings. Then I made 3 important phone calls. The first was to my friend Lisa, a corporate attorney who had recently gone through a divorce of her own. I need your advice, I explained, my voice steady, and possibly a place to stay for a few days. The second call was to a locksmith requesting emergency service. How soon can you get to Fifth Avenue? I asked. It's urgent. The third call was to our building's head of security, a kind man named Frank who had always been friendly to me. Frank, this is Nora Harrison in 12A. I'm dealing with a sensitive domestic situation and need your help. My husband won't have key access tonight, and I need to make sure he isn't allowed up without my explicit permission. With those calls made, I sat at our dining room table and wrote a brief factual note to James, explaining that I had witnessed enough to know our marriage was over. I stated that I would be contacting a divorce attorney and expected civil communication through legal channels going forward. No accusations, no emotional pleas, just the calm statement of fact that our relationship had ended the moment he decided to humiliate me publicly. I placed the note on the kitchen counter, where he would see it immediately upon entering, then went to the hallway to wait for the locksmith. The locksmith arrived promptly, a middle-aged man named Carl, who asked no questions as I explained that I needed all the locks changed immediately. All exterior doors, he confirmed, unpacking his tools. Yes, and I'll need at least 3 copies of the new keys, I replied. While Carl worked on the locks, I went down to speak with Frank in person. The security desk was quiet at this hour, with only Frank and a younger guard on duty. Mrs. Harrison, Frank greeted me warmly. How can I help you? I explained the situation without unnecessary details. My husband and I are separating, and I need to make sure he cannot access our apartment tonight or any night going forward without my explicit permission. Frank's expression softened with understanding. He had worked in luxury buildings long enough to witness many marriages dissolve. I understand completely. I'll make a note in our system and alert the other security personnel. Your husband will not be allowed up without your approval. Thank you, Frank. There's one more thing, I added. Would it be possible to access security footage of the building entrance tonight? I'm installing a personal camera system, but until that's running, I'd like to know if my husband attempts to enter. Of course, Mrs. Harrison. Building policy allows residents to request footage when it concerns their own safety. Back in the apartment, I found Carl finishing up with the locks. He demonstrated how the new keys worked and handed me the copies. As he packed up, I paid him generously, including a substantial tip for his discretion and quick service. Once he left, I moved on to the next phase of my plan, disabling James's access to our smart home system. I logged into the administrator account and systematically removed his profile from every connected device: thermostats, lights, entertainment systems, security cameras, and door access. Then I changed all passwords and security questions, ensuring he could not regain access remotely. With the physical security taken care of, I began the emotional task of deciding what to take with me tonight versus what could wait. I moved methodically through our bedroom, selecting clothes that I had purchased with my own money and that held special meaning. In the bathroom, I gathered my personal care products, leaving his untouched. When I reached our wall of photos, my composure finally cracked. There we were, smiling on our wedding day, on vacations, at family gatherings, a visual timeline of what I had believed was a happy marriage. I carefully removed photos of just myself or with my friends and family, leaving the ones of us together. Those memories no longer belonged to me. As I placed the last photo in my bag, the doorbell rang. Lisa had arrived, her expression a mixture of concern and determination when I opened the door. "You okay?" she asked, simply pulling me into a hug. "I will be," I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. Lisa helped me carry my bags down to her car, then came back up to help me finish preparing. We set up a small security camera facing the front door connected to my phone so I could monitor any activity remotely. "Are you sure you want to wait and watch?" Lisa asked, as we completed our preparations. "You could just come home with me now." I shook my head. "I need to see this. I need to know it worked." At my insistence, Lisa left with my bags, heading to her apartment where I would join her later. I remained in my car across the street from our building, watching and waiting. According to the dinner timeline, James and his companions would likely be finishing their extended discussions soon. At 1:37 a.m., a taxi pulled up to our building. James stumbled out, clearly intoxicated, his tie loosened and shirt slightly unbuttoned. He paid the driver and swayed slightly as he walked toward the entrance. Through my phone, I watched the security footage as Frank intercepted him in the lobby. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see James's expression change from confusion to anger. He gesticulated wildly, pointing toward the elevators. Frank remained calm but firm, showing him something on his computer screen, likely the note I had asked to be added to our account. James pulled out his phone, presumably to call me. I watched my phone light up with his call, which I declined. He tried again immediately, then began typing furiously, text messages that I didn't read. Back on the security footage, I watched as James's anger escalated. He tried to push past Frank toward the elevators, but the younger security guard stepped forward to block his path. James shouted something loud enough that I could see other late-night residents in the lobby turning to stare. Frank picked up the lobby phone, saying something brief before hanging up. Within minutes, 2 more security personnel appeared. They spoke to James calmly but firmly, eventually escorting him back outside despite his protests. On the sidewalk, James looked up at our apartment windows, his face a mask of confusion and rage. He tried calling me again and again. I declined. Finally, he hailed another taxi and disappeared into the night. Only then did I start my car and drive to Lisa's apartment, a strange sense of calm settling over me. The life I had built with James was over, but a new one was just beginning. One where I would never again allow myself to be devalued or disrespected by someone who had promised to love me. I awoke the next morning in Lisa's guest bedroom to 53 text messages and 17 missed calls from James. I scrolled through them without reading, noting the progression from confusion to anger to desperate pleading, evident just from the preview text and timestamps. What happened to our locks? Why can't I get into my apartment? Answer your phone. You're overreacting to nothing. This is ridiculous. Please call me. Where are you? You're making a huge mistake. We need to talk about this like adults. I'm sorry if I upset you. Please come home. The last message, sent at 6:13 a.m., simply read, "I need my suits for work. Where did you go?" I deleted them all without responding and blocked his number. Any communication would now go through my attorney. Speaking of which, I called Lisa, who had already left for her office. "Can you recommend a good divorce lawyer?" I asked when she answered. Already done, she replied. Caroline Weaver. Best in the city, specializes in high-asset divorces. I texted you her number. She's expecting your call. Caroline was able to see me that morning. Her corner office in Midtown exuded power and competence much like the woman herself. In her 50s, with impeccable silver hair and a razor-sharp gaze, she listened to my story without interruption, taking occasional notes. You've already done many things right, she said when I finished. Securing your documents, taking only your personal property, documenting the timeline of events. The lock change is legally complicated, but practically effective. She laid out a strategy that was both fair and protective of my interests, explaining that New York's equitable distribution laws meant I was entitled to a fair portion of assets acquired during our marriage. What about the apartment? I asked. It's in both our names, but his family provided the down payment. We'll include it in negotiations. At minimum, you're entitled to half the increased value since purchase, Caroline explained. Now let's discuss immediate next steps. We'll file today and have him served as soon as possible. In the meantime, I suggest continuing to stay elsewhere and communicating only through me. As I left Caroline's office, my phone pinged with a notification from the security camera I'd installed. James was at our apartment door arguing with a maintenance worker who was explaining that he couldn't help with access. Throughout that day, James made 3 more attempts to enter the apartment, each captured on camera. He tried sweet-talking the daytime security staff, claimed he had forgotten his key and ID, and finally demanded access as the legal owner of the property. Each time he was refused. Between meetings with financial advisors and discussions with Lisa about longer-term housing options, I monitored James's increasingly desperate attempts to contact me. He called my office, sent emails to my work account, and even reached out to mutual friends asking about my whereabouts. That evening, I made a strategic decision. I composed a single email to James's parents, with whom I had always had a cordial relationship. I attached photos from the security camera showing James attempting to enter the apartment, along with a brief, factual explanation of what had transpired at the dinner. I did not ask for their intervention or support. I simply wanted them to know the truth before James could craft his version of events. The response came within hours. A phone call from Elizabeth Harrison, James's mother. "Nora, dear," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "I can't express how disappointed we are in James's behavior. While we would normally never interfere in our son's marriage, please know that William and I do not condone what he's done. If there's anything you need during this difficult time, please don't hesitate to ask." "Thank you, Elizabeth," I replied, genuinely touched by her support. "I appreciate that more than you know." Word of our separation spread quickly through our social circle. Friends called and texted, many expressing shock, but others admitting they had suspected James's infidelity for some time. Several of James's friends reached out to me with suddenly friendly overtures, making me realize how many people had likely known about his relationship with Amanda, but had said nothing to me. Most surprisingly, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Nora, this is Amanda Kingston. I want you to know that James told me you two were separated and divorce was imminent. I never would have engaged with him otherwise. I'm truly sorry for my role in this situation." Whether her apology was sincere or merely an attempt to distance herself from scandal didn't matter to me. What mattered was the confirmation that James had been planning to leave me, making me the fool who was supporting him while he orchestrated his exit. 2 days later, Lisa called with news. "You're trending on the financial gossip blogs," she said without preamble. "What? Why?" Apparently, James has been making a scene at work. Showing up late, leaving early to deal with personal matters, yelling at his assistant. His father had to step in yesterday. The rumor mill is connecting it to Amanda Kingston suddenly withdrawing Lexington Group from the hotel partnership talks. So Amanda had cut ties with James professionally as well as personally. Without her company's investment, the project James had been leading was in jeopardy. His distraction was affecting his work performance, and his father, always the businessman first, was stepping in to mitigate the damage. A week after the fateful dinner, Caroline called with an update. "James has retained counsel, Michael Brodsky, aggressive but not particularly creative. They're requesting an urgent meeting to discuss reconciliation before we proceed further. There will be no reconciliation, I stated firmly. I'll relay that message. Also, our financial investigators have some interesting findings. It appears James has been moving money between accounts for the past few months. Nothing illegal, but definitely preparation for something. Preparation for leaving me for Amanda, I realized. He had been planning his exit while I was still committed to our marriage. The betrayal cut deep, but it also solidified my resolve. The meeting with James and his lawyer was set for the following Monday. I spent the weekend moving into a short-term rental apartment and focusing on self-care, something I had neglected during my years of prioritizing James's needs. When Monday arrived, I entered the conference room at Caroline's office with my head held high. James was already seated, looking disheveled in a way I had never seen before. His usually perfect hair was uncombed, his designer suit wrinkled and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He stood when I entered, reaching toward me. "Nora, thank God. Can we please talk privately? This has all gone too far." Caroline smoothly intervened. "Mr. Harrison, as previously communicated, my client has no interest in private discussions. Please be seated so we can begin." What followed was 3 hours of James alternating between anger manipulation and pleading. He accused me of overreacting to one stupid comment, claimed that nothing had happened between him and Amanda, and suggested that my emotional instability was the real problem in our marriage. When those tactics didn't work, he switched to reminding me of all he had given me, the lifestyle, the connections, the opportunities I wouldn't have had without him. "And what did I give you, James?" I finally spoke directly to him, my voice calm but firm. 7 years of support, moving across the country twice for your career, building a home while you built your resume, and standing by your side at every event and dinner. I gave you loyalty which you clearly didn't value. It was one mistake, he insisted, his voice breaking. One stupid comment. Amanda means nothing to me. It wasn't about Amanda, I replied. It was about respect. You didn't respect me enough to be faithful, and you didn't respect me enough to be discreet. You humiliated me publicly because you simply didn't care how I would feel. By the end of the meeting, it was clear that no agreement would be reached that day. As I gathered my papers to leave, James made one last attempt. "What am I supposed to do now?" he asked, his voice small. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him, really looked at the man I had once loved enough to marry, and felt nothing but a distant pity. "That's not my problem anymore, James. For once in your life, figure it out yourself." 6 months after the dinner that ended my marriage, I stood in my new apartment watching the sunset over the city. The divorce had been finalized a week earlier with a settlement that both Caroline and I considered fair. I kept my personal assets, received a portion of our joint investments, and relinquished any claim to the apartment in exchange for a cash payment reflecting my share of its value. James had not fared as well in the aftermath of our separation. According to mutual friends who still kept me updated despite my lack of interest, he had been removed from the hotel expansion project after Lexington Group, and 2 other potential investors withdrew. His father, disappointed by both his personal and professional failures, had reassigned him to a less prestigious role within the company. As for the apartment he had been so desperate to enter that night, he had eventually sold it, unable to afford the mortgage payments on his reduced salary. The last I heard, he was renting a 1-bedroom in a neighborhood he would have considered beneath him during our marriage. Amanda Kingston had disappeared from his life completely. Once it became clear that James's star was falling rather than rising, she had cut all contact, personal and professional. According to industry gossip, she was now dating a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley. I, on the other hand, had found unexpected opportunity in the ashes of my marriage. Several of the business contacts I had made during that fateful dinner had reached out to me professionally in the weeks that followed. Walter Blackwell, impressed by my composure and marketing insights, had hired my agency for a major rebranding project. That single contract had led to referrals, and within 6 months I had doubled my client roster and hired 2 new team members. My new apartment was smaller than the penthouse I had shared with James, but it was mine in a way that place had never been. I had chosen every piece of furniture, every decoration, every color without having to consider anyone else's preferences or judgments. For the first time since college, I was living entirely on my own terms. The emotional healing had been more challenging than the practical arrangements. In the early weeks after our separation, I had struggled with doubts and moments of weakness. Had I overreacted? Should I have confronted James directly instead of taking such dramatic action? Would couples therapy have saved our marriage? But therapy, individual not couples, had helped me recognize the patterns of subtle disrespect and control that had characterized our relationship from the beginning. James had never seen me as an equal partner but as an accessory to his life, a supporting character in his story, rather than the protagonist of my own. What you did that night wasn't just about self-respect, my therapist had observed during one session. It was about reclaiming your agency. You didn't wait for Kim to decide the fate of your relationship. You made that decision yourself. My circle of friends had changed significantly as well. Some mutual friends had drifted away uncomfortable with taking sides. Others had revealed themselves to be James's friends first, mine only by association. But I had also reconnected with old friends I had neglected during my marriage and formed stronger bonds with women like Lisa, who had supported me unquestioningly during the crisis. I had even started dating again cautiously. Nothing serious yet, but I was open to the possibility of finding a partner who would value me for myself, not as an accessory or status symbol. One Tuesday afternoon, as I was leaving a client meeting in Midtown, I literally bumped into Amanda Kingston outside a cafe. We both froze, recognition immediate. "Nora," she said, recovering first. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Likewise," I replied, adjusting my grip on my portfolio case. "I thought you were in California." An uncomfortable silence stretched between us. Finally, Amanda spoke. "I know no apology can undo what happened, but for what it's worth, I am truly sorry. James lied to me about the state of your marriage, but I should have verified his claims before getting involved." I studied her face, searching for insincerity but finding none. "We were both misled by him in different ways. I've moved on." She nodded, seeming relieved. "I heard your marketing agency is doing well. The Blackwell campaign was impressive." "Thank you. And Lexington Group still acquiring hotels." "Among other things," she replied with a small smile. "We've diversified our portfolio." As we parted ways, I realized I felt no anger toward her anymore. She had been a catalyst for change in my life, but the responsibility for our marriage's failure lay with James and to some extent with me for ignoring the warning signs for so long. Almost exactly 1 year after the dinner that had changed everything, I received an industry award for the Blackwell campaign. At the ceremony, surrounded by colleagues who respected my work and friends who genuinely cared about me, I felt a sense of peace that had been missing from my life for years. As I left the venue, a familiar figure caught my eye across the street. James was standing outside a coffee shop, looking into the window. He was wearing a suit that I didn't recognize, not one of his custom-made designer pieces, but something off the rack that didn't quite fit his frame. His hair was longer than he used to keep it, and even from a distance I could see that he had aged beyond the single year that had passed. For a moment I thought he might turn and see me forcing an uncomfortable encounter. But he remained oblivious to my presence, eventually entering the coffee shop without glancing in my direction. I realized then that I felt nothing but a distant compassion for him. Not love, not hate, not even anger anymore. Just the kind of empathy you might feel for a stranger going through hard times. The power he had once held over my emotions was completely gone. That night back in my apartment, I reflected on the journey of the past year. I had lost a husband, but found myself. I had experienced betrayal, but also discovered my own strength. I had been publicly humiliated, but had risen from that moment with more dignity than I knew I possessed. The healing wasn't complete. Perhaps it never would be entirely, but I was at peace with my decisions and optimistic about my future. I had learned that self-respect wasn't selfish, that boundaries weren't bitter, and that choosing myself wasn't something I needed to apologize for. So if you're watching this and you're in a relationship where you're not valued, where your worth is constantly questioned or diminished, know that you deserve better. You deserve to be someone's first choice, not their convenient option. You deserve to be admired openly, not compared unfavorably to someone else. And most importantly, you deserve to walk away from anyone who doesn't recognize your value. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to prioritize your self-respect? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, sometimes the quietest moves create the loudest impact. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the strength to write your own happy ending.